final score, Arizona Wildcats 101 to the USC um, Trojans 103. Um, the biggest thing that kind of stands out to me is 33 free throw attempts for the USC Trojans as compared to only 16 free throw attempts for the U of A Wildcats. Um, One of the commentators was saying they should, you know, go in and then, well, just not go in specifically, but just the U of A should pass it around and pass it around to an uh, open shooter. Um, the U of A did end up shooting pretty good from three-point land. I think they shot, was it 43% or something like that from three-point land, as compared to USC Trojans, which only ended up shooting 37% from three-point land. But the dagger, what U of A was having such a hard time with was Stewart from the USC Trojans. Stewart knocked down, I think it was 5 three-pointers, um, and York was defending against him. I think York had 7 defensive breakdowns. Um, I think 4 of those defensive breakdowns were against Stewart. Uh, and then Trier had, I think he had 5 defensive breakdowns right there at the end. I really think that whenever you have your defensive breakdowns right there close to the end of the game, um, in the close to the end of the regulation game, and then close to the end of first overtime, second overtime, third overtime, fourth overtime. When you have those defensive breakdowns and in that part, then that's when you're kind of in trouble. That's when I think you want to be looking at somebody as far as a defense. What are they doing? Um, Maybe it's, as far as Trier, I think that because I think he was the highest scorer for the U of A Wildcats on this game. So, and I think in a few games, quite a few games before that. But whenever you score so many times, then I guess it makes him tired. It made him tired. So he doesn't play. He wasn't playing as good of defense as was needed in those final waning minutes of the regulation, the first overtime, second overtime, third overtime, fourth overtime. So that's what I think that he was having those severe defensive breakdowns. And I don't know. I mean, there's a time when your defensive guard is defending against somebody, say for example Jacobs, because Jacobs, what the USC Trojans did, was they kept pushing the ball in, dribbling the ball in, driving in to the key, and trying to get those fouls, trying to draw fouls from the U of A Wildcats, and
this program has been brought to you by Little Nicky.
Thank you, honey. We had 7 total defensive breakdowns against Jovanovic, the forward for the USC Trojans. I think 4 of those defensive breakdowns were from Tarczewski. Tarczewski was another one that was right there in those final minutes of the third half, or the third overtime and the fourth overtime. he was getting tired, and that's kind of understandable that you get Tarczewski kind of tired because, I mean, what Miller was saying that, let's gradually increase the time period on Tarczewski, not from 0 to 100 miles an hour in 5 seconds, or 100 miles an hour in 0 seconds, 1 second, because he's just not, his ankle is just not ready for that just yet. And so the last game, I think Tarczewski played 15 minutes, and he felt good, but then in this game he played 40 minutes. Tucson Ristic played 18 minutes, comparably, and if you look at Jovanovic with getting three with causing 3 defensive breakdowns from Ristic, and then causing only four defensive breakdowns from Tarczewski. And Tarczewski did a pretty good job as far as not having so many defensive breakdowns against Jovanovic. Now these are forwards on forwards, so it's a pretty good match. We had Allen that had 7 defensive breakdowns. 4 of those defensive breakdowns were on Jacobs, I think. 4 or 5 were defensive breakdowns were on Jacobs. And a lot of those defensive breakdowns were I don't know, it's like right at the end, usually Allen is start to fall down as far as the defensive breakdowns. He gets a little bit more defensive breakdown problems right there at the end of the game, or in that first overtime, second overtime, third overtime, fourth overtime. But Allen is, I think he just got warmed up, and then at the end of the game, then he kind of got tired. Everybody was getting tired. I mean, you could tell in that fourth overtime that the guys were just too tired. The U of A players were just too tired, and they weren't dribble penetrating at all, trying to dribble, trying to go in, trying to push the ball in. They were going for those easy 3-point shots, or those outside field goals, not going inside the key and pushing the ball inside like Jacobs was for the USC Trojans. So I think that's one of the reasons why the U of A Wildcats ended up losing this game, was because they just did not keep on driving into the key right there, especially in that fourth overtime. And the USC Trojans did, and that was the deciding factor of the game. So you had Trier that I think he got really tired, and he was one of the reasons why he was the defensive breakdown that was most severe in that fourth overtime. But so it's something we're going to have to work on. So with York and with Trier, they were both defending against Stewart. Stewart had 27, so maybe next time we can put Allen on Stewart, or let's see, somebody else. Maybe Parker Jackson-Cartwright only had 1 defensive breakdown, so maybe Parker Jackson-Cartwright would be good against Stewart. I don't know. Maybe he's too little. I'm not quite sure. And as far as McLaughlin, then he wasn't really too much of a factor. He did score, I think, 17 points. Jovanovic had 17 points. McLaughlin had 17 points. I think Jacobs had 18 points. So it was just those, I think it was the defensive breakdowns from Allen on Jacobs. And The thing about it is, one of the things about these defensive breakdowns is the guards are the guards are dribble penetrating, but then there's supposed to be a switch off to a forward or to a center, so that the forward or the center can hopefully block that shot from that guard. USC was doing that good against our guards, against the U of A guards, but the U of A forwards weren't really able to stop the guards from dribble penetrating, especially Jacobs. So that was something that we also need to work, that the U of A Wildcats need to work on. The final score, U of A Wildcats 101 to the USC Trojans 108.